problems with viewing PDA as a profile of autism from the 2015 PDA literature by Richard Woods at London South Bank University PhD student. So yeah, I do have a few conflicts of interest, so I am developing various PDA tools such as the Pathological Demand Avoidance Belief Scale. I do earn some income from delivering training sessions on PDA, and I reluctantly advocate for PDA to be diagnosed as a standalone entity, category. So a bit about me. I am diagnosed as autistic in 2012. I do meet Elizabeth Newton's PDA profile, but I am not emotionally attached to it. I'm presently no longer basing my identity on diagnostic categories as much as I can do. I am trying to equally respect divergent views and evidence on PDA to critically synthesize appropriate interpretations on PDA. My PhD is investigating PDA, and I am part of the Critical Autism Studies / Disability Studies group at London South Bank University. This is my interpretation of PDA and its literature. Others may disagree. Sometimes I may use medical model based language, but this is more because it's in the source material than I actually intrinsically believe in it. I recognise that the mental disorder categories are intrinsically social constructs. So yeah, just briefly covering the introduction. I'm expecting this video to be about half an hour, although no, my luck it'll probably be about 35 minutes because I've been slightly underestimating them previously for the last few videos, that is. So yeah, this is a review of most of the PDA literature from 2015, so that's the calendar year, and that's available either in print or and online before it gets published in print. This is not including the other problems dividing autism, which are noted in the autism literature itself, because for some reason it's just not included in the PDA literature before 2000 or in 2015 or earlier. This is despite Francesca Happe, who's a prominent PDA co-author of some prominent PDA literature, being on the committee that set the DSM-5 autism criteria and has published around its problems subtyping autism. So yeah, hence me referring to this editorial by Happe. Yeah, this video is going to be the first of a two-parter, and it's part of my broader series discussing my views on PDA in 2023. So the second video will be discussing how PDA traits have changed over time to become autism-likes. But in order to do that kind of first, I kind of need to show how it's problematic viewing PDA as a profile of autism within the literature from 2015. So the actual sections of this video is why is it important to review the 2015 PDA literature, like debates on what PDA could be, problems viewing PDA as a profile of autism, to problems creating valid autism subtypes that are discussed within the PDA literature, through to kind of just a few concluding reflective questions. So yeah, why should we kind of why should we review the 2015 PDA literature? This is one example. I'm not going to go through this screenshot, but what it does, it shows you 2.5 paragraphs of people discussing what PDA could be and certain issues with it as part of the literature review of an article. It's from page 3237 of Riley et al. 2014. It's arguably one of the better discussions of PDA within literature at that time period. But it kind of asks the question, who's written 2.5 paragraphs kind of providing a kind of what seems to be a relatively good overview of the PDA debate at the time. And the authors of this are quite a few people, but they include some prominent PDA authors, especially at the time. So you got Christopher Gilberg, Elizabeth van Ayers, and Francesca Happe as part of these authors who have helped write a relatively good overview of the PDA at the time in his article. So yeah, so why would these authors write 2.5 paragraphs detailing PDA discussions? The obvious ones that research practitioners are expected to be reflective, such as to question their assumptions, such as is PDA a profile of autism, and scholarship is meant to accurately reflect extant previous literature on topics, such as kind of debates around the topic. So what that means is that the authors of Riley et al. 2014 should have written those 2.5 paragraphs detailing PDA discussions. So that obviously raises a question: have other prominent PDA profile autism advocacy authors also discussed what PDA could be, or problems viewing PDA as a profile of autism? And if you actually look at the literature from around 2015, you all know that actually a lot of the prominent PDA profile autism advocates around that time have actually, at least at some point, discussed what PDA might be, or that is problematic viewing PDA as part of the autism spectrum. So this is just a brief table, kind of doing listing where certain authors have discussed what PDA might be, or problems viewed PDA as a profile of autism. So for Phil Christie, he has done it on page 5 of his 2007 article and on page 12 of the Christie et al. 2012 book. Um, and it's the same for Fidder on page 12 of the Christie et al. 2012 book. And for Christopher Gilbert, he's actually been, in my view, relatively good in actually questioning what PDA might be, but he's also kind of argued that it's a form of autism at the same time. But he's done it quite extensively over about 5 pieces of literature. So there's a commentary article in 2014 on page 769. Again, there's a paragraph on page 2885 of Kopp and Gilbert 2011. There's a couple of pages in Gilbert et al. 2015, which is page 980 and 983. And again on Riley et al. 2014, page 3237. And again on pages 769 and 771 of Wing et al. 2011. The last one, so like pages 769 and pages 771 of Wing et al. 2011 are applied to Judith Gould. And the final two, it's the same. It'll be the same. Will be the same kind of piece of literature for Francesca Happe and Elizabeth Nyon. So that would be Anais 2014b, pages 539 and pages 541. Anais 2015, page 2. This is an article that I tried to get published, but it wasn't accepted into a journal, but it is out there online. And Riley et al. 2014, page 3237, and that's the same for Elizabeth Nyon's. So, this kind of moving on. So, what does literature in 2015, PDA literature in 2015, actually say what PDA could be? There's actually quite a lot of discussion in literature at that time. So, a few people noted that PDA might be a female form of autism. Quite a few have also noted that PDA might be a Cedar syndrome. So, what I mean by that is that PDA's features are represented. It's not a distinct category, but its features are seen throughout either the entire autistic population or its features are representative of other kind of accepted categories. So, yeah, so I mentioned that bit. So, there's also debates if PDA is a form of attachment disorder, a personality disorder, or maybe a form of oppositional defiant disorder. There's also debates if PDA is a new category which is distinct from autism, oppositional defiant disorder, or other neurodevelopmental categories. And there is also debate if it's separate from autism, just more generally. So, and there's also debate if PDA is seen in non-autistic populations, such as ADHD, anorexia nervosa, certain behavioural phenotype syndromes, epilepsy, hikikomori, language disorder, score refusal, and selective mutism. And it's also been questioned if autistic girls if basically girls who are autistic and or with ADHD, or just girls who have ADHD also meet the criteria for being attributed with PDA. So I'm including kind of non-autistic girls with ADHD also in there, because that's reflected in the Kopp and Gilbert 2011 study. So yeah, there's also debates around if PDA behaviours maybe seen in autistic people, but are not due to autism, so there might be a double hit. So, such as so for some autistics, their issues are due to them having like psychopathic tendencies. I'd also point out that the PDA literature and the DSM-5 also know that anxiety is a co-occurring issue, as in not an autism feature. Because there questions if PDA features are due to co-occurring difficulties such as ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, precursors of schizotypal disorder, or social anxiety, etc. And there's also debates if PDA is a triple hit, such as is it representative of autism, anxiety, and conduct problems. So, yeah. we're kind of moving on to issues within the literature which are problematic, viewing PDA as a form of autism. So this is a quote from the 2003. So, like, hanging together as an entity is not enough if that entity is not significantly different from both autism and Asperger syndrome, either separately or apart. So this is Newson literally telling us that PDA needs to be different from autism. Um, so there's also quite widely recognised in PDA literature in 2015 that it's problematic viewing PDA to be a form of autism. So that basic aspects of PDA make it problematic diagnosing it people with autism, basically. Um, and this is one reason why. So this is Newson et al. 2023's diagram of how Newson viewed the autism spectrum versus the face mental disorders, and with including PDA in it. So Newton viewed the autism spectrum to include Asperger syndrome and autistic disorder, which is based on childhood impairment, as you might see, and has like social communication issues and empathy deficits, which is separate from PDA and specific language impairments, which are categories which include dyslexia and dysphagia. And you'll see that PDA is not based on childhood impairment, has intact kind of social manipulation, kind of empathy and theory of mind. It's relatively intact. It has factors such as kind of like harassing people. Its socialization issues are meant to be different from autism, so they're meant to be due to like deficits in social identity, pride, or shame. It can have issues such as kind of harassing people. It obviously has like the rapid mood changes and the impulsivity aspects, and you can have the comfortable role play and pretend aspects. The specific language impairment is important because that includes a lot of non-autistic people, because something like 3% of the human population have specific language impairments, and that includes a lot of non-autistic people. It's also important because that does not have restrictive repetitive behaviours and interests, which tells you that Newton's pervasive mental disorders do not need to have restrictive repetitive behaviours and interests. So what it tells us is that Newton's pervasive mental disorders diagram is not the same to, is not equivalent to the pervasive mental disorders group within the DSM-4. This matters because the entire fundamental crux of why PDA is meant to be a form of autism is that the DSM-4 pervasive mental disorders grouping was replaced with a single autism category within the DSM-5, which is technically the latest American Diagnostic Manual. Technically, it's been slightly revised, but the autism criteria is relatively the same. So they've made a very minor, change, which, yeah. So, so just going to move. I've got 2, 3 other videos discussing this diagram in more more detail. I have 2 or 3 other videos where I systematically just go through Newson's work and break down Newson's axiology and methodology, which makes it problematic viewing PDA as a form of autism based on Newson's work. But moving on, there are other issues with it. So literature notes that there's quite a few aspects of PDA's descriptions which make it problematic viewing it to be part of the autism spectrum. So it notes that PDA's obsessive demand avoidance differentiates it from autism, and the role-playing pretend, the being comfortable in role-playing pretend, is not seen in kind of classic autism, so it's problematic attributing it with autism. That PDA's impulsive features is not seen in autism, and that would basically tend to work with their own rules. Newton also questioned if PDA's fleeting behaviour is due to ADHD. Others have kind of noted that the obsessive behaviour, which can be focused on other people, is obviously different from most people's understandings of autism, or many people's. The key aspect of the literature at the time is that PDA is meant to have at least relatively intact theory of mind. It's meant to have sufficient theory of mind to be manipulative, especially part of the social demand avoidance aspects, and that these features can often be targeted at specific persons. This is basically done with intent, deliberate towards people. A couple of articles noted that this theory of mind is meant to be logical but not emotional, and also the PDA literature acknowledges that PDA meant to have good eye contact, which differentiates it from autism. So yeah, I'm not going to read this out, but this is a table basically from a recent essay I had published, and this example items from various PDA tools, which denote the behaviours that are done either manipulatively or done with intent, so i.e. deliberately done towards a person. And most of these items are from PDA tools that were available in 2015. So this is reflective of people's thinking and clinical descriptions in 2015. And a lot of these will not be indicative of autism. So it's stuff like good at getting around others and making them does he or she wants, does A harass other people, such as through writing threatening letters, making verbal threats, stalking, making untrue accusations of sexual abuse. Um, would you describe A as being good at getting around others and making them do as he or she wants, or playing people off against each other? Does A threaten to hurt him or herself, or do things to hurt him or herself? Is this behaviour impulsive, or does A do it on purpose to show he or she's in control, cause distress, or get attention? And yeah, I'll include a link to the description to where you can find this table for yourself. Um, so yeah, moving on, the literature says that PDA gender ratio is even, and this is obviously lower than is seen in autism because there's a male bias in the autism gender ratio. Um, but it's also often noted in the PDA literature at this time in 2015 that PDA has different educational strategies from autism, such as that children and young persons with PDA often respond best to spontaneity, humour, and unpredictability, which are very different from the structure and repetition at the core of educational strategies for autism. Um, so, yeah, we're going to kind of move on to get towards the end of this video. So, the 2015 PDA literature also notes that non-autistics with PDA are present in multiple studies. So that would be kind of Newson's Newson et al. 2003. More recent literature notes that not all of Newson's cases would meet threshold for DSM-5 autism. Newton herself excluded cases which showed autism features from her database. And Newton was quite consistent in her view that PDA was not autism. There is a children person with attachment disorder and an adult score of 1 in an ISO 2015. There's one not meeting threshold for autism in 2016 in an ISO 2016, and Ryan 2014 has one person not meeting threshold for autism out of 4 case studies in there. There also seems to be non-autistic persons with PDA in a 9 2014A and a 9 2014B, but you have to interrogate the PDA groups in order to do that. So the rationale for that is in a different video, which I'll include in the description. So the PDA literature at the time also denotes that PDA can be attributed as a standalone category, and most of these are going to be case studies, except for Newton et al. One can also include Graham White, 2002, but I've not included that because it's not a published article, which I'll try to keep this to kind of published articles that are in print or either online or in print. I'd also note that Eaton and Banting case study did attribute PDA as a standalone category, but the authors view PDA to be a form of autism. So, yeah, I think there's only about 3 more slides after this before we get to the conclusion. So, we're moving on to issues with creating valid autism subtypes in 2015 PDA literature. So, most of these points are from Wing et al. 2011. So, the authors who were Lorna Wing, Judith Gold, and Christopher Gilbert noted it's extremely difficult, even impossible, to define boundaries of different autism subtypes. They noted that the larger numbers of autistic persons have aspects of Asperger's syndrome and autistic disorder with intellectual disability. So what this means is they're trying to say that there's loads of autistic people who do not fit neatly into either Asperger's syndrome or autistic disorder, that they kind of overlap it and in the middle. And if you look at Newton's 2003, Newton excluded PDA cases who had autism features. He literally states that. So what that means is that Newton found cases with PDA which had autism features, and she just said no, they're not in my database. Ringetail also noted that autistic people can transition between autism subtypes, and Newson et al. 2003 said that people can transition into and out of autism autism or PDA. Um, so yeah, um, Ringetail also kind of noted that I don't know why I haven't put over Ringetail there. It's because I know why I didn't do that. It's fine. The difficulty in defining boundaries of autism versus normal range of typical development, such as persons with highly skilled in specific areas. So this is actually noted in Wing et al. 2011. It was because I had this text written on a different slide and I copy pasted it over into this slide and forgot to put the citation in. That's fine. So this is the citation for the previous point. So these issues dividing autism into valid subtypes are applicable to all proposed subtypes, and that is in Wing et al. 2011. Um, more, not more recently, but kind of Giraldo, which wrote 2003, which is a commentary on Newson et al. 2003, made some kind of pertinent observations. So, like, some PDA features would be especially difficult to reliably identify, such as a sense of identity pride, actually pride or shame, not price, and that attributing PDA as a strict category is a risk of creating confusion for parents and others involved. So that would include clinicians. Um, yeah, so more recently, so an ISO 2014B noted that PDA may interact atypically with autism tools, which in that article was the CAST, which I think is something like the childhood autism screening tool. So they give a specific example of how PDA might score highly on items indicative of autism, but not for reasons related to autism. So they specifically mention like imposes routine on oneself or on others due to need for control, which is obviously not the same as kind of having a preference for routines for autism. So what that means is that PDA might score high in autism tools, but not for reasons associated with autism, and that means that it can affect kind of artificially inflate PDA scores and autism tools. But yeah, so we're in the final point slide before we get to conclusion, and this is me just pointing out that these issues in PDA literature, problems with viewing PDA as a profile of autism, these do not include the broader autism literature at the time, which was actively discussing problems successfully dividing autism into subtypes. And I would point out that actually this literature should probably be in a PDA literature because of Francesca Happe being involved in the committee that literally removed autism subtypes and had written about the many good reasons for removing autism subtypes, such as how attempts to create autism subtypes have kind of consistently failed, or that autism subtypes were removed to reduce stigma for all autistic persons. And this is from an editorial written by Happe. So yeah, I mean, and it's going to end on four reflective questions essentially. So, are these points, as in, are these reasons for viewing PDA, reasons for its problematic viewing PDA as a profile autism, discussed in recent PDA literature, and why? And can omitting kind of problems viewing PDA as a profile of autism bias a study's axiology or its methodology or its data interpretation or its conclusions or studies investigating PDA, and why? And has autism expanded to include PDA features in part or in its entirety, and why? And the final question is, can one assume a person is autistic due to being attributed with PDA, and why? So, yeah, these are my contact details if you would like to contact me. So that's my email address, my Twitter handle. My ResearchGate link has my ResearchGate profile has my most recent literature, and you should be watching this video on my YouTube channel. There's 4 reference slides, which I'm not going to linger on load long because you can pause the video if you want to do it. So this is the second reference slide. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I wish you all the best, and hope you find it informative. So thank you and goodbye.